Hi, I'm Cicely, and my parents hired a fake lawyer to steal the house my grandmother left me, just so they could hand it to my sister, the one they've always called the Golden Girl. But what hurts more than the scheme is how long they smiled in my face while setting it up. They praised me for keeping the family together, while quietly locking me out of my own home, changing the locks, forging documents, even suing me. How does a family get so good at pretending you were never meant to belong? And why did it take losing them to finally find myself? When I first moved back to Wilmington, I told myself it was temporary. Just a few months, maybe a year. But the longer I stayed in my grandmother's old beach house, the more I realized how much I needed stillness. Not the kind that echoed from silence, but the kind that felt earned, after years of being overlooked, spoken over, and rearranged to fit someone else's idea of family. That Saturday morning, the sky was stubbornly clear, blue in a way that made the air feel sharp. I had just finished rinsing my coffee mug when I saw her silver Buick pull into the gravel driveway. No warning, no call ahead, just Vera, my mother, wearing a lemon-colored blouse too bright for March, clutching a tin of blueberry muffins like they were a peace offering. I opened the door slowly. She smiled like we were in a commercial. "I thought you might want a little something sweet." I didn't say anything at first, just stepped aside and let her in. Her perfume hit me before her footsteps did, rosewater and powdered expectations. She walked straight to the kitchen like she still owned the place. "This house still smells like her," she said, setting the tin down on the counter. "Your grandma always had the windows cracked open this time of year, said it aired out the bitterness." She laughed at her own words, but it didn't land. I nodded. She liked fresh air. She tapped her fingernails against the tin lid, her smile tightening. "You've really made this place your own. It's good. But Cicely, have you thought about what happens next?" I turned, leaning against the counter. "Next?" "I mean the house," she said gently. Too gently. "It's a lot to manage. Taxes, maintenance. It's not like you've always been handy." And I was thinking, well, your sister's been doing so well with her business. She knows how to manage property value. Might be easier, just paperwork-wise, to put the title in her name. Temporarily, of course. There it was, coated in sugar, but sharp enough to cut. I stared at her, waiting for the part where she'd laugh and say she was joking. That never came. "It's just for simplicity," she added. "It doesn't change anything. You'd still live here. It's just a precaution. Legal structure, that's all." "Legal structure," I repeated, like tasting something bitter that pretended to be sweet. That afternoon, I walked down to the mailbox just to get away from the air inside. The waves weren't loud that day, but the wind carried their rhythm in low pulses. As I walked back, I thought about all the times I'd been told what to do, where to sit, when to speak, how to love in ways that made others feel comfortable, even if it meant setting myself on fire. I remembered birthday parties where Callista got the bigger cake even when it wasn't her day, recitals where I waited for applause that never came, family photos where I stood at the edge while she was always in the center. That evening, Vera insisted we all have dinner as a family. Malcolm came too, quiet as ever, carving his roast chicken like it was the only thing that deserved focus. "It's just paperwork," he said, nodding along. "Makes sense." Callista shrugged, picking at her salad. "Honestly, I don't care either way. It's not like I'm begging for a house." But she smirked when I hesitated, like she knew I wouldn't fight back. "I mean," she added, "if it makes things easier for Mom and Dad." I felt everyone's eyes on me. Waiting, not asking, expecting. Later that night, I sat alone on the porch. The crickets were louder than usual, or maybe I was just too quiet. Vera had left behind a folder, neatly placed on the kitchen table. I hadn't opened it until then. The document inside wasn't legally binding. No signatures, just suggestions. Bullet points about streamlined inheritance and liability reduction. Every word read like it had been workshopped for weeks, crafted to sound helpful, designed to feel harmless. But I knew better. I had learned to read the air, not just the words. I walked back to the living room, shut the curtains, and turned off the lights. The house felt different. Not less mine, but suddenly surrounded. Like it had been marked, and I was the only one who didn't get the memo. By midnight, I was pacing. I checked the locks, kitchen, front door, side entrance, all secure. When I passed through the hallway again, something stopped me cold. The front door was cracked open, just slightly. The air didn't feel broken, but disturbed, like someone had stepped through it. My gaze darted to the kitchen table. The folder was gone. The morning after the folder disappeared, I stayed glued to the couch, the soft hum of the refrigerator doing little to quiet the noise in my head. I hadn't slept. Not really. My mind kept flipping through possibilities. Maybe I misplaced it. Maybe I hadn't locked the door. Maybe. Then came the knock. It was too polite to be casual, too firm to be neighborly. I walked to the door slowly, pulse in my throat, and opened it to find Vera again. This time, she wasn't alone. A man stood behind her, mid-30s, cheap suit, nervous eyes, holding a folder like it was an audition script. "This is Todd," Vera said brightly. "He's here to help you sort out the title situation." Todd gave a shaky half-wave. "Hi there." I didn't move. "Sort it out how?" "Oh, don't be like that," Vera said, brushing past me as if she hadn't been told to call before showing up. "Let's all just sit down and talk this through." Todd stepped inside, eyes darting around like he wasn't sure if this was legal. Probably because it wasn't. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where the folder had been. Vera placed a fresh manila envelope down. Todd fumbled with his papers, clearing his throat. "I have here a standard property transfer form," he mumbled, sliding the sheet toward me. "Just basic stuff, ensures smoother logistics moving forward." I didn't pick it up. "Where did you go to law school, Todd?" He blinked. "Excuse me? Your degree? I assume you're licensed in state?" He coughed. "Well, I haven't technically, completed the process, but I've studied contract law independently." Vera cut in. "Don't be rude, Cicely. He's here as a courtesy. This doesn't need to be so complicated." I turned to Todd. "So you're not a lawyer?" He adjusted his tie, visibly sweating. "I'm here to assist. You don't need a license to help families sort things out." I picked up the document. The formatting was off, the legal language inconsistent. Half of it looked like it had been pulled from a website. "Todd, do you even know what joint tenancy with right of survivorship means?" "Of course," he said quickly. "It just means, shared stuff." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insulting. Callista chose that moment to waltz in through the side door like she hadn't been waiting outside the whole time. "Oh, didn't know you were doing this today," she said, blinking with faux innocence. "What's going on?" Vera beamed. "Just helping your sister with some legal transitions." Callista looked at me. "I mean, if Mom and Dad think it's best, I don't want to be involved, but it would make sense, right? I already handle the Airbnb upstate." I stood up. "You can all go now." Vera's mouth twitched. "We're trying to help you." "No," I said evenly. "You're trying to erase me while pretending it's kindness." Todd scrambled to pack up his papers. "I'll, wait outside." By the time they all left, I was shaking, not from fear, but clarity. They weren't hiding it anymore. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a coup. That evening, I still went to the fundraiser. It was for a local library renovation, something my grandmother used to support. Vera had insisted I come weeks ago, back when we were pretending things were normal. The room buzzed with catered warmth. I sat at a table near the back, alone, while Callista laughed with donors at the front. The MC eventually took the mic. "Tonight, we honor Vera and Malcolm for raising two extraordinary daughters. Callista, who has redefined sustainable living and women's entrepreneurship." Applause erupted. No mention of me, not my name, not a glance. Just a silent omission that screamed louder than any insult. I didn't cry. I didn't get up. I just stared at the slideshow, looping behind them. Photos carefully chosen, angles cropped to make it look like I had never existed. Sunday morning sunlight poured through the kitchen window, like it didn't know it wasn't welcome. I stood at the sink with a sponge in hand, scrubbing a plate that had already been clean for 5 minutes. The air in the house was too still. No breeze, no laughter, no trace of anything except the lingering quiet from last night's fundraiser. I walked to the dining table, still cluttered with envelopes, catalogs, and a few sticky notes I'd left for myself about bills. That's when I noticed it. A folder I hadn't seen before. Crisp. Centered. Like it wanted to be found. I opened it with a kind of dread I couldn't name. Inside was a typed memorandum, neatly formatted, legally worded, and bearing my name in the salutation. Memorandum of Understanding, Voluntary Transition of Property Interest. It was a trap disguised as clarity. The language was ambiguous, but dangerous. Phrases like informal acknowledgement of shared rights and intended transitional occupancy. I'd seen these phrases before, in law articles, in documents I'd translated during temp jobs, and once, in a binder Vera left open on her dining room table. No signature, no date, just my name and an implication of consent. One paragraph was highlighted. The current resident acknowledges the familial agreement for future transfer of title to Callista R. Murphy as mutually beneficial to all parties. I sat down, gripping the paper tighter than necessary. My chest wasn't pounding. It was buzzing, like something beneath my skin had woken up. They didn't need me to sign it. They just needed me to panic, or better yet, to stay quiet. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. The fan turned slowly overhead, slicing the air into deliberate, patient cuts. A memory landed. 2 months ago, over dinner at Vera's house, she passed me a stack of mail. Birthday cards, a couple of charity flyers, and what I assumed were household documents. I'd signed a card while chatting with Malcolm about coastal erosion and tax breaks. Could they have scanned that signature? Of course they could. They knew how to make things look official, and they counted on me being too polite or too tired to ask questions. I stood up abruptly and checked the front door. Locked. Then the side, the windows, all closed. Still, something felt breached. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Not because of the document, but because I could suddenly imagine them in here when I wasn't. Moving things, rewriting history in real time. I stared down the hallway toward my grandmother's bedroom. Her voice came to mind. Always know where your name goes. And who's using it. I grabbed my keys and left. The hardware store wasn't far. I didn't rush. Just walked like I had errands to run. Like I wasn't buying peace of mind in the form of a $39.99 indoor security cam and a bag of screws. Back at home, I installed the camera quietly, one facing the front door, the other pointed toward the kitchen and dining area. I didn't even stop to eat. The work kept my hands from shaking. I checked the angle through my phone app, made sure the red light blinked like it was supposed to. Then I closed all the blinds, turned off the main lights, and waited. The first hour, nothing. The second, just a moth fluttering past the lens. By 11:30 p.m., I was half asleep on the couch, my phone resting on my chest. And then, movement. I jolted up, stared at the feed. The timestamp read 11:38 p.m. Someone had opened the back door. The frame was tight but clear. A hand reached into the drawer by the kitchen wall, the same drawer where I'd found the folder earlier that day. It was Vera's hand, bracelet and all. She didn't look around, because she didn't expect to be watched. She took something, then left. I sat there, breath caught somewhere between fury and finality. They weren't guessing anymore. They had decided this house was theirs, and I had just decided that they were wrong. I was at the hardware store again, this time to pick up a new air filter and some weather stripping, when my debit card declined. The clerk, a young guy with a polite awkwardness, ran it again. "Maybe it's a chip issue?" he offered, sliding the terminal toward me. I opened the banking app on my phone, already feeling heat rise in my neck. The balance on my joint account was zero. Worse than that, I saw half a dozen unfamiliar transactions labeled processing fees, legal review, and one marked simply ownership cert. I stepped outside into the parking lot, blinking into the sun, and called the bank right there. The hold music was cheery in a way that made my skin crawl. After a long wait, the rep finally answered. "Yes, ma'am. We see a restriction placed on the account. It's pending verification. Ownership claims have been submitted from a secondary party." I froze. "Who?" There was a pause, paper shuffling. "The name listed is Vera Murphy." I didn't reply. Not at first. The rep repeated, "Is that someone authorized on the account?" "No," I said. "She isn't." When I called Vera, it rang once before going to voicemail. I tried Malcolm. Same. No explanation, no denial, just silence as thick as cement. The next morning, I was sorting through the mail when I saw an envelope addressed to me from a credit union I didn't recognize. Inside was a denial notice for a home equity loan application, under my name. The request had used my address, but listed a phone number and email I'd never seen before. I sat down hard in the chair. My hands felt numb. This wasn't just overreach anymore. This was identity theft dressed in family ties. I stared at the paper until the lines blurred. For a moment, I tried to come up with excuses. Maybe the forms were sent in error. Maybe someone at the bank had misunderstood something. But the voice in my head, the one I used to hush, was screaming now. They were building a future without me in it, using my name as scaffolding. And I had let it get this far. That guilt, more than the fraud, settled heavy in my chest. I thought back to years of minor infractions. Vera forwarding my mail without asking, fixing things that weren't broken, writing me out of conversations with a smile. I dismissed them as habits, harmless. But now I understood. Those weren't quirks, they were rehearsals. I knew I needed someone who could look at this clearly, without being emotionally tethered. That afternoon, I called Raymond. We hadn't spoken in a few months, but I'd helped him sort out a complicated tax issue last year when no one else could explain his pension adjustment. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, kiddo, you all right?" "No," I said, "but I'm getting there. Are you home?" He lived 20 minutes outside town, in a ranch house with a porch full of potted herbs and a retired greyhound named June. I grabbed the folder with the fraudulent paperwork, the screenshot from my bank app, and a flash drive with the camera footage from the night Vera entered the house. By the time I pulled into his driveway, the sun was beginning to slide down the trees. He met me at the door with a mug of peppermint tea and didn't say a word until I'd sat down and started laying out the evidence. He scanned each paper, nodding slowly, occasionally adjusting his glasses with the same precision he used to trim his rosemary plants. Then he looked up. "Cicely, this isn't just bad family behavior. This is criminal. What you have here is a pattern, fraudulent documentation, unauthorized access, impersonation." He picked up the flash drive. "And this. If she used any of this to manipulate legal status or financial institutions, this is attempted theft, through legal impersonation." I stared at him. By my own family. Raymond didn't flinch. "Then it's time," he said, "to stop treating them like family." Something inside me shifted. Like a lock that had been jammed for years finally clicked. I sat in the driver's seat for almost an hour after leaving Raymond's. The engine was off, the heat low, and my hands on the wheel, even though I had nowhere else to be. His words wouldn't stop echoing. "Stop treating them like family." I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed out an email to Vera. No salutation, no warmth. Just one clean sentence. Effective immediately, any future entry to this property must be requested in writing and approved by me in advance. Any unapproved access will be considered trespassing and addressed legally. I hit send and watched the little bar crawl across the screen. That evening, I began sorting through the week's mail. Catalogs, political flyers, a coupon book I'd never use. One envelope stood out, not addressed, just folded into the center of the neighborhood newsletter. No markings, just a slim USB drive taped to a plain piece of paper. I almost tossed it, assuming it was spam. But something about the way it was slipped in, not mailed, but placed, made my fingers pause. Curiosity won. I plugged it into my laptop. One file, kitchen.convo.m4a. No date, no author, just silence, then voices. Vera's voice, calm and clipped. She thinks she's establishing roots, but this is just a waiting period. Then Callista's chuckle. It's cute how she thinks it's hers. Once the paperwork's through, she'll hand it over without a fight. Laughter. Then the sound of a chair scraping across my floor. My floor. I pressed pause. My own breath felt foreign in my chest. That conversation wasn't theoretical. It wasn't old. It was recent. I could hear the rain tapping on the windows, same as last Tuesday. They'd been in my house again, laughing, planning, calling me the house sitter. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there with my hands in my lap and let the fire rise, slow and measured. The next morning, I texted Vera, "Can you stop by today? I'd like to talk." Calmly. She arrived around 11, carrying a scarf and a face that tried to look open but never quite managed it. "I'm glad you're ready to talk," she said as she stepped into the living room. I gestured toward the dining table, where I'd placed my laptop. The audio file was ready, paused at the start. "Just listen," I said. She sat down. I clicked play. For 3 minutes, she didn't say a word. Then, "You weren't supposed to hear that." "I did," I replied, "and now you're going to hear me." She tried the usual route first, minimization. That was taken out of context. I let it play again, louder. "It's not about the house," she said. "It's about what's best for the family. Your sister has the resources, the presence." I folded my arms. "Say what you said when you thought I wasn't listening. That I'm just watching this house, holding it until you decide it's time to take it back." Vera shifted in her chair. "Cicely, you're being ungrateful." "No," I said, my voice even. "I'm being clear. From this point forward, any attempt to claim this house, legal or otherwise, will be met with consequences." She stood up. "You think threats make you righteous?" I stepped closer. "You've confused obedience with love." I stopped mistaking the two. She left without another word. That night, I locked every window and door twice. I checked the cameras, reviewed the angles. I finally allowed myself a few hours of sleep. Just after midnight, I woke up thirsty and walked into the kitchen. The basement light was on. I hadn't touched that switch in days. The back door, once again, was unlocked. And the air inside? Heavier than it had been when I went to bed. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my grocery bag still in the back seat, something felt off. It wasn't just that the wind had shifted or that the mailbox leaned a little further today. It was the door, my front door. The lock had been changed. My key didn't fit. I tried the spare in my coat pocket. No luck. I crouched and noticed the smallest slip of paper taped to the inside of the screen door. "Keys have been secured for safety." "See?" I stood there, frozen, the air thick around me. My own door, my own lock, and I'd been shut out like a guest overstaying a welcome no one sent. I didn't try to break in. I got back in my car and drove 15 minutes to a coffee shop near the courthouse. I ordered a tea I didn't want and borrowed the barista's tablet to check my emails, hoping to distract my brain with anything normal. That's when it hit me, Callista's channel. Her face filled the screen, beaming in front of a camera, standing in what she called my sustainable sanctuary. My furniture, my walls, my floor. A throw blanket I'd sewn from scraps was draped behind her, presented as some curated design choice. "This home has been in our family for generations," she said sweetly, "and now it's where I've chosen to reconnect with simplicity, with earth, with roots." She never said my name, not once. I clicked out of the video and called Raymond. He didn't ask questions. "Meet me there in 45. Bring your phone and don't touch the door." By the time he arrived with a locksmith and a woman holding a clipboard and a neutral expression, his notary, I was no longer shaking. I was still. The locksmith worked quickly. Within minutes, the door opened with a clean snap. We stepped inside. The scent of lavender and eucalyptus filled the air. My air. I noticed a ring light tucked behind a chair, a yoga mat unrolled by the fireplace. A tripod leaned casually against the piano I hadn't touched since Nana died. Raymond took photos. The notary recorded timestamps. I walked through slowly, each step reclaiming space that had been quietly stolen. I placed a printed cease and desist letter on the kitchen island. Next to it, I left a still image from Callista's video, the moment where she motioned around her home. On the back, a sticky note. You filmed this in my house, without consent. Then I changed the locks again, this time upgrading them, and installed 2 new internal surveillance cameras. One in the hallway, one facing the kitchen. No more guessing, no more assuming. The next morning, I didn't get out of bed right away. I laid still, phone in hand, scrolling absently until I saw her post. Black background, white text. Some people don't know how to share love, only walls. The comments were a mess. People offering support, others asking for context. Some questioning if it was about me, others guessing it was about a breakup. My phone buzzed all day. Old classmates, distant cousins, a few neighbors. Hey, I saw something weird online. You okay? I always thought something felt off about her. No one called Vera. No one called Malcolm. And none of them said anything outright. Just gentle probes, as if poking a bruise they didn't want to claim they'd caused. I didn't answer any of them. Not out of bitterness, but because silence finally felt useful. It wasn't passive anymore. It was mine. By evening, I was making soup when the doorbell rang. A man in a dark blazer handed me a white envelope. Certified, he said. Signature required. Inside was a letter from a law office I didn't recognize. Callista was suing me. Emotional damages, wrongful occupation, unjust enrichment. The words blurred for a moment, but I blinked and refocused. Folded the paper neatly, slid it back into the envelope. She had used my space to craft her narrative, and now wanted to punish me for not playing the quiet background character she'd written me to be. I set the letter down on the counter beside the cease and desist, now slightly curled at the corners. This wasn't just about the house anymore. They weren't just trying to take space. They were trying to erase me. The envelope was cream-colored, thick paper, the kind that tried to whisper elegance. It arrived on a Wednesday, tucked between an electric bill and a coupon booklet for pest control. I would have tossed it with the rest if the return address hadn't caught my eye. Legacy and Leadership Foundation. Inside, an invitation. A formal gala honoring community families who had preserved and passed on generational wisdom and wealth. Vera and Malcolm Murphy were listed among the honorees. I nearly laughed. They had included me on the RSVP list, barely. The name printed on the card was Cecile, a spelling I hadn't used since a substitute teacher botched it in 3rd grade. For a moment, I hovered over the trash. Then I folded the card and slid it into my purse. The night of the gala, I walked into the ballroom and immediately saw her. Callista, center stage, wearing a champagne-colored gown and talking with a local TV anchor, like they were old friends. Her hair perfectly curled. Her laughter strategically effortless. I found my seat. Table 12. Back near the exit. The name card was still wrong. As I sat, someone tapped my shoulder. Mark Evans. We'd gone to high school together. He looked me over once and smiled. Didn't know your sister got the beach house. Cool story. Must be great having a legacy like that in the family. I didn't respond. He moved on, already looking past me. Dinner was bland. The speeches were worse. The MC took the stage, mic in hand, and began the presentation. We're thrilled to honor Malcolm and Vera Murphy, who have exemplified stewardship and vision in preserving family heritage. Their daughter Callista stands today as the next generation to carry that torch forward. Applause filled the room. A video played, a montage of old home movies, edited carefully. I saw our childhood living room, but only Callista danced in front of the tree. Our grandmother's beach house flashed across the screen, but only Callista was seen painting the porch rail. I was nowhere. Then the big moment. Callista was called to the stage. She now resides in the family's beloved property, turning it into a beacon of sustainable living, a true modern legacy. She smiled like the cameras were there for her. They probably were. My fork hit the table. I stood up and walked out, not toward my car, but to the side entrance where the event coordinator's table sat. I pulled a small flash drive from my clutch. "This," I said calmly, "needs to play next." The woman blinked. "Excuse me?" "It's part of their legacy. You'll want to include it." She hesitated, then relented. 10 minutes later, the projector screen switched. The room went still. Vera's voice echoed from the speakers, calm and cutting. "She's just holding the house until Callista takes over." Then Callista's voice. "It's cute how she thinks it's hers." You could feel the air shift. Callista froze mid-smile. Vera looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. I didn't wait for the silence to settle. I turned and walked out the front door. No shouting, no final words. Just the sound of heels on marble and a name finally unstuck from someone else's shadow. Back at home, I set my phone on the counter. It lit up over and over. Texts from people who'd been in the room, others who'd heard about it online. I had no idea. "Why didn't you tell me? Was that real?" And one from my father. "You didn't need to humiliate us." I didn't reply. I just saved every message. The courtroom hadn't even opened its doors yet. The courthouse smelled like old books and bleach. I'd barely slept the night before, but my mind was sharper than it had been in months. Raymond met me at the curb, 2 briefcases in hand, one of which held everything we'd gathered. Emails, timestamps, voice recordings, the footage from my front hallway. "This is it," he said, handing me a folder with my name printed neatly on the tab. "You ready?" I nodded once. "Let's go." We walked through security and into the courtroom. The buzz from the Legacy and Leadership Gala still lingered around town. Even the woman at the reception desk offered a sideways glance, like she knew exactly who I was and why I was here. Callista's attorney, polished, young, probably hungry for a win, greeted us with a nod that was more performance than politeness. Callista didn't look at me. She sat next to him in a navy dress, lips pressed tight, her phone face down on the table. The judge, an older woman with clear eyes and a voice that could slice marble, called the room to order. Callista's side opened first. Her attorney spun a narrative that sounded rehearsed. Words like emotional toll, family betrayal, unlawful occupation, and abuse of familial trust danced off his tongue like poetry. I let it happen, stone-faced. When it was our turn, Raymond stood, walked to the center of the room, and handed the bailiff a USB drive labeled Exhibit A. The judge tilted her head slightly. "Proceed." The screen lit up. Raymond's pre-recorded video played, calm and precise. "Based on the submitted documentation," he began, "the claims made by Callista Murphy rest on forged paperwork, unauthorized account access, and impersonation of legal authority." He showed the timeline, dates that didn't line up, signatures that were traced, title lookups done under Vera's login. The tone was factual, not dramatic, just enough to expose everything. The judge's jaw tightened. She asked for clarification twice. Raymond provided it without missing a beat. Then she turned to me. "Ms. Murphy," she said, "do you have anything to add?" I stood slowly. "Just that every claim made against me relied on me staying quiet." I didn't. Silence settled heavy in the room. Then the judge leaned back and said, "The burden of proof was yours, Miss Callista. She just carried it." There was no dramatic gavel slam, no outburst, just a sharp finality in the way the judge signed the dismissal. Callista didn't move. Vera and Malcolm sat 2 rows behind her, both frozen. Vera's hands were clasped so tightly, her knuckles were white. Malcolm looked like he'd aged 10 years since the last time I saw him. I didn't speak to any of them. I didn't need to. Outside the courthouse, a few local reporters hovered near the steps. "Ms. Murphy, would you like to make a comment?" I looked at them for a long second, then said, "The fact spoke for me. That's all." And I walked away. That evening, back home, the porch light flicked on automatically when I pulled into the driveway. The air smelled like salt and damp wood. I stood at the threshold of my house, still mine, and paused before unlocking the door. Inside, it was quiet. The best kind of quiet. Not because no one was calling or emailing or demanding something, but because I had nothing left to prove. That night, my phone didn't buzz once, and it was perfect. The morning after the hearing, the house felt heavier than it should have. Not in a bad way, just full. Full of echoes, full of air that didn't have to brace itself anymore. I stood at the kitchen sink with both hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't yet filled. The silence wasn't tense, it wasn't even sad, but it was real. When I opened the front door to let in the morning breeze, something small and rectangular slid against my foot. An envelope, aged and soft at the edges, sealed with my grandmother's familiar handwriting. My name, inner cursive, Cicely. I stared at it for a moment. The ink was faint, like she'd written it long ago. I sat at the dining table before I dared to open it. "Dear Cicely," it read, "I know how they look at you. I know what you carry quietly. But this house is yours, not because I gave it to you, but because you're the only one who never tried to own it. You loved it honestly. I saw that." I stopped reading for a moment to catch my breath. "You will protect this place, not for me, not for them, but for yourself. You will rebuild more than walls here. You'll rebuild yourself." It wasn't a legal document, but it was the only record that mattered. Later that day, I folded the letter into a small glass frame and placed it by the front door. I didn't cry. I just looked at her words and felt the house exhale with me. That evening, Ellis showed up. He stood on the porch with his hands in his pockets and that cautious way of shifting weight he did when he didn't want to hurt someone but knew he might. "I don't think I can do this," he said. "Not like this. I can't be the person who stands between you and everything you've built, but I also can't be the person who watches you lose everyone to keep it." I nodded slowly. "Then you shouldn't." He opened his mouth to explain, to soften, but I stepped forward and kissed his cheek. Some goodbyes don't need speeches. He left without looking back. I didn't ask him to. Callista never responded to the ruling. She didn't email, didn't call, didn't show up at my door again. But 2 days after the verdict, her channel went dark. Every video that featured the house was gone. Her bio no longer mentioned a beloved family home. I didn't check again. That world, those followers, those curated captions, they weren't mine to begin with. One afternoon, the phone rang and Malcolm's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Your mother," he said, voice gravelly, "thought she was doing what was right." I didn't reply. "I didn't stop her," he added, softer now, "and I should have." I waited. "I hope you'll understand one day." I kept my voice level. "This house won't fix that, but it might be the reason I finally stopped breaking." He didn't argue, didn't say goodbye either. The line just went quiet, then dead. Months passed. Spring became summer, and the lavender I planted along the front porch bloomed taller than expected. I painted the shutters a soft gray, not for aesthetic, just peace. When the neighborhood held its seasonal brunch, I offered my place. Not for grandstanding, just space. Real space. Chairs that didn't match. Food people brought in Tupperware. Laughter that didn't require performance. A young couple from 2 streets over walked in, looked around, and asked, "Whose house is this?" I smiled and pointed to the framed letter near the door. "It belongs to someone who knew how to leave behind a little bit of herself." Then I turned back to the guests, refilled a pitcher of lemonade, and let the wind carry the rest. Sometimes the fight isn't about winning. It's about being seen. It's about standing your ground when everything and everyone around you insists you don't belong. I never thought I'd have to fight my own family for the right to exist in a place that already had my name written in its bones. But I did. And I learned that boundaries aren't signs of disrespect. They're declarations of self-worth. If you've ever felt invisible, if someone's ever tried to rewrite your role in your own story, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not a placeholder. You don't need permission to protect what's yours, your peace, your name, your legacy. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have stayed quiet, or would you have spoken out? I'd love to know your thoughts. If this story moved you, type 1 in the comments, or tell me what state or country you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate with you, I still want to hear. What would have made it more meaningful? Let's talk about it. If you found value in this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what comes next. I promise, every story here has something to say to the part of you that's been waiting to be heard.